to everyone in the building. It's great to see you all here at Deakin. I know it's a nice sunny night out there, so there are certainly things to be doing other than listening to me tonight. And for those that have joined us online, we will be scanning the Skype and being able to help any questions you may have along the way, and trying to include you as we go into the discussions and some more class-based activities that we might undertake. So the other thing I would like to say just from the onset is I hope you don't mind me sitting down. I have actually just had some surgery on my ankle, so I might just sit down for a little while. So hopefully about next week or around time to get there. For those online, can you see okay both me and the slides? You probably want the slides more than me, so yes, thank you. You can? Great. So I'll come to a bit more of an introduction about myself as we get through some of the early slides. But my name is Steve Hansen, and I work at PwC. So I'm part of the course here at the Principles, what I refer to as an industry-based lecturer. So what we're hoping to do in our 2 weeks together now is to supplement some of what you're learning in the theoretical sense with a tiny bit more theory, but a lot more application as to what we do day to day, trying to take some of these decision models and help make a decision from them. So we're really trying to give this part of the module or of the unit a bit more practical aspect to you there. So what we're going to do over the next little while is really explore the concept of what is a good model. So decision modeling here, the term model can be synonymous, and at this stage, a lot of what we'll talk about is technology agnostic. Those of you that may see, and if anyone's taken a quick look at my machine there, a lot of what I do day to day is Excel based. So all the practical examples that we have got and that have been posted online in the cloud are Excel based, but you can really approach these in many different ways with different technology as well. So really what we're thinking about as we go through our time together, and this is where I've just called it setting the scene, is around largely two components to what is a good model. The first part is the way it's structured. So we'll cover off some time tonight around best practices and so forth. And the second is the decisions you can make from it. So really we're looking at how we approach a task or a question that we want to solve. The second part to it is, well, what can we really do to answer that question? I've just said here over the next few pages, we'll introduce you to a theoretical case study that I made up. I've called it the next big thing. And you'll see it's a bit theoretical, but a bit, we can draw parallels to that and a few things that we look at as well. So throughout the module here, we'll explore both the theoretical and practical considerations that we build in integrated financial forecast. Is that a word that people have heard before? Has anyone ever heard the term a three-way model before? No, a lot of it comes from the banking world, and they've really coined that term a three-way model because it integrates the financial statements. So in this case, and we're not assuming that you've got accounting knowledge or anyone here is a qualified accountant and so forth, but really what we'll do in our time together, and I'll give you some Excel modules to have a look at and work through, is the integrated financial statements encompass a P&L, a cash flow, and a balance sheet. So I'll give you some ideas how to approach those as well. But once again, the course isn't meant to design for you to walk out the door in 2 weeks' time and say, give me what's called a three-way, I'll start building it, I won't get an investment banking job. We're really trying to let you unpick the approach that we take and some of the decisions that we can make. So with the next big thing, and obviously this is something I made up in preparing the course, what you can see here is that the founders of the next big thing believe they secured exclusive rights to import and market a product that is destined to become the next big thing. So I took a little bit of a liberty with the title. Early modelling seems to suggest that revenue in the first years is about $1 billion and an EBITDA margin of 30%. So they could make about 300 million that they could, in a way, retain and use for the way that they've structured this business. So one lesson I learned in my career early on is someone said to me, this was one of the big four banks, in a place like this, good news travels fast. So in this case, people are really jumping at the fact that they could make 300 million. They'll look at how they fund it and what it means for them. So I've just said here, the management team has admitted that their approach to the modelling is high level, and they're in a process of considering what the risks are and whether the forecast numbers will be achieved. So in that sort of sense, and what I've sort of learned through my experience is, all of a sudden people are hanging on a number. In this case, we're looking at $1 billion of revenue and 300 million of EBITDA. So for anyone that isn't from an accounting background, that's the earnings before interest, tax, depreciation and amortization. So a lot of people think that that may have a cash equivalent to what's going on. And, you know, you can see here that the directors are probably quite excited. So they've actually said to someone, come along and help us build our model. And what you see over the course of what we're doing is, I've just led this slide in with the excitement of Blakey. So, you know, people are really getting excited about what would happen. So the 30% EBITDA margin was sort of a gross margin of about 400 million. But what we'll have a look at when we go through our case studies here is that the gross margin could be any one of one things. It could be 422 million, and we'll actually show you a way in which the initial model, we had a mistake in it. So it's wiped it off by about 20 million as well. And I'll show you some techniques how we might for that as well. So we found a coding error, and sometimes that happens in models. So unfortunately, the news isn't as great as we thought, but it's still pretty good. We actually did, and I'll show you some probability weighting that we can put through our forecast. And coincidentally, it came up with 420 million again. And I've just led that thought topic there about hang on with the question mark. Should it be the same? We're actually expecting it to be less. And there's actually reasons why it sort of comes back to the same number there. It could be 500 million. And I've got some probabilistic simulation and just some worked examples of how you might go through that. So together, probably early next week, we'll look at the Australian dollar and US dollar exchange rate over the last 30 odd years. And we'll do some simulations around that. But in this case, it's an import. Remember everyone reading from that slide that they had the rights to import that. An increase in the dollar obviously helps them before they can purchase it for. So there's some upside there potentially if we need a bit more simulation. Or it could be between 450 and 475 if we use some Monte Carlo. And I'll give you some examples of how to do that in Excel as well, notwithstanding that there are other statistical packages out there that can do it as well. So this slide's really giving you a sense of what is it we're trying to achieve? We're trying to forecast a business, and what decisions can we make on it there? Before we sort of move on to a little bit more, did anyone have any thoughts as to this type of thing? Has anyone ever seen this before or had to approach a problem in a similar way? No? Well, one thing we often see in our role is every time there's a decision to be made on a model, it's really on a base case only. And I think what you see in this the study that you're doing, you've all made the effort to do some postgrad study. And what I think I'd like to introduce you to over the next 2 weeks is the ways in which we can cross-check and really stress test what we're sort of forecasting and how we go about that. So that's what I've sort of said there. Knowing the above, what decisions can we really start making from a model? And that's really what we're going to focus on. And that's one thing that I focus on every day in my job at PwC. So I just thought it was probably a good time to sort of make a little introduction into myself. So I'm lucky in that probably over the last 10 years or so or more, I've been in dedicated financial modelling roles for 2 of the Big 4 accounting firms, which has been really great. I've really got to see and learn some really great things in my time there. And really a lot of it's had some context of mergers and acquisitions. I've really had a good chance to do other things like separations and integrations. So taking a part of a business out, either selling it or setting it up on its own and then working out so that the way it's sold down the track. Financial and operational restructuring. So one of my biggest jobs ever was at a shopping centre out of Italy. If anyone knows me with corporate history, they know that didn't go so well. 2008, thereabouts. I was out there for a year and a half doing all the support, that sort of work, which was really great because you really learn a lot there. And capital raisings and IPOs, that was something that was mentioned there because we've probably gone through a period just recently. We've seen a lot of those in the market. And it's a really good time to sort of think about what do they forecast, they reflect, and how do they go about models from there. The other point there, just note that I'm a proud Deakin alumni, so yeah, it's good to be back, and also qualified CPA. So I was probably one of the last groups to go through an MBA and CPA through nearly 10 years ago, so it was really good. Yeah, so that's me, and one thing I do really enjoy is my job, and lucky to do it day in, day out, but also, it's not a 9 to 5 job, but, outside 9 to 5, I can still stay involved through things like this lecturing and a few other things I do, like I'm on a moderation board for the fast stand things. We'll come across that when we come to modelling best practice, so I get to do a few things like that outside sort of the job. So what I thought we would do, and I think it's the way that the course is done, is you may have come across a few elements of modelling best practice already as you've been doing this module. That was sort of my understanding you had. But what I thought we'd do is really step back a little bit to help understand that a bit more. So the best practice principles really have a large bearing on how models can be used. They can either enhance or limit the decisions being made from the model. Let's hope it's more the former in terms of enhancing rather than limiting. But we all know that mistake, and I introduced it to you on that slide earlier. Sometimes there's just an error. It can be the fact that there's an input error, or it could be the fact that there's a coding that someone's made inadvertently or misinterpreted some of the commercial parts of the model. So to the extent we've got best practices that are available, and I've got some ones that are in the public domain we can talk to, we can really start to think about how we structure our model that way. So it's really that latter, that where we want to enhance it, that's the ultimate aim. But we're really trying to manage or mitigate through the adoption of these best practices and various tools and techniques the fact that we want to make sure that we're really trying to avoid risk model. So what I've got here, and you'll see these in the lecture notes, did the PDF copy go up in the cloud? So there's the best practices, and I've just tried to log those there where I access them from the public domain. There's the tools that we can use, so things that you might be able to obtain to do some testing of models, and they're all publicly available as well. Some techniques that you can use in terms of trying to test the model. And this last one here is a case study, and if I've got any case studies, I've just tried to anonymise those from other clients that I've worked with there. So that's how we'll sort of approach the module and our time together. Any questions on that before we go online? But always feel free to keep it interactive if you need to, or ask questions online. We'll try and make sure you get a point to be involved as well. So it's not just standing up the lecture. So what I thought we would do is really extend upon any understanding that you may have of best practice principles, and also bring in what I've sourced from the public domain. Group these best practice principles into three things. What to think about before I start modelling. So I've called that prior to commencement. What to think about when modelling, actually doing the model build. And also what to think about when someone else is looking at your model. So there's a review and a decision being made. And there's we'll get to a group where we'll sort of work that through with what we're sort of seeing these best practice principles. And then I'll also do some concepts of driver-based forecasting. You can undertake a class activity using information from Qantas. So looking at what they've got available in the public domain and seeing how that may help us forecast the business as well. So really about tonight, that's sort of what we'll cover off. And then next week we'll do a lot more of the practical as well as a bit of theory. So, the other things that we'll do, some real life examples of how clients have sort of stepped through the decision process they've done, and had a look at some other clients from different industries, so mining, infrastructure, energy generation, and energy distribution. Lots of information on those as well. And also look at some of the ways they've used their forecasting approaches to undertake a basic simulation. So modelling best practices. The three main resources that I've got are all out there. At the time of getting these, actually was in about January was when I first started working on this course. And I think the smart principles, which were a business called Corelli, is actually merged with another, so we might be able to get those again, but I've just kept them in the notes for your reference as well. Welcome. So FAST is a standard that, as all good things are, is an acronym. So FAST is a modelling best practice that supports a philosophy and promotes simplicity, but at the same time making sure the structure is rigorous. And the acronym FAST is really 4 F's. So it's flexible, appropriate. Anyone would like to guess the second two? Sorry? Simple, close. I think that would be one. Anything else? We'll move ahead and we'll come back. So it's structured is the one that I think also underpins a bit of simple and transparent. So what I might do as I talk through each of the acronyms is really give you a sense of what we're seeing in our experience, why this is useful. So really, the structure and styles of the model require flexibility for its immediate use and long term. So has anyone ever seen a model that was created for one use and then 4 years later, it's doing something completely different? Yep, seen a few nods at last. They exist in every organisation throughout the world, and we see them day in, day out. Really what we're trying to think about here is a model is really done for a point in time. Then it should be reevaluated, reassessed, and revisited. So if we were in the programming world, we would have a requirement, we build to the requirement, we execute it. If a changes need to be made, it's either done through a variation process or a change type request, and then it's tested, put in place, and systemised and operationalised that way. Who gets a sense that happens to financial forecast models? What sort of stage of the spectrum do you think we get to with those? Someone builds it. What happens next month? Someone adds. One thing you can do in Excel, and everyone that's got access to Excel, insert a new worksheet. Start to add some calculations on it, hit a link back in, link from, start to change it, and you just get a sense that day in, day out this happens. And the models that are in place that have had decisions made on them at a point in time and they're still used going forward really start to get changed a lot, chopped and changed. And every company does it. It's infinite through no fault of its own. I was even thinking in preparing for tonight's lecture, we were able to put an Excel file on an email, send it off so someone else picks it up. And that's where this flexibility comes in, knowing it'll obviously ultimately, at a point of origin, make that you start to recreate itself. So we need to consider the requirements, both what we're using it for now and potentially long term. And in theory, a good model is one that meets those requirements and then is re-evaluated at the end and changed as it needs to. Appropriate is another really good example of the way FAST is looking at what they're doing there. So really, the model needs to make sure that what the business assumptions that are in the model are actually coming out in the output. I remember once a job where there was a mistake in the model, and it took an analyst in Japan at like 4 AM their time to find it down in row 3000. But when we stopped and thought about what had happened, we realised that 2 or 3 days later, people were actually saying the model just doesn't make sense. I don't expect the numbers out of it to be this high, or to be this good. What happened in that case was an inbound investment decision. People were thinking they were putting in a bid at a certain price, and when the model was found, they had to go back to the lower price. And they were worried about whether they would remain competitive, sort of bidding for the asset, and whether others would, bid more and so forth. But it really reinforced to me the level of appropriateness. And it also reinforces the fact that sometimes you've just got to step back and say, is it plausible? The fact that $100 million. Sometimes people may have heard that in the industry called multiple. You're paying 100 times what it earns to buy it. That maybe is a cross-check that you can say it just doesn't make sense. Has anyone been following a lot of the infrastructure mergers and acquisitions in the last few years? Australia's sold a lot of ports and electricity generation and so forth. Sometimes they trade at a multiple of 20 times what it earns, which is a real lot, but that's what the market's sort of accepted. And that's a case where appropriateness can help with that sort of assessment of the model. Yeah, do a cross-check. What does it mean? Are we in the ballpark of what others have sold for? Port of Melbourne sold this year, and our firm had a good role in that. So did last year, Port of Botany in New South Wales, and the year before, Newcastle and Kempler, or Kempler, places like that, all had their ports sold. Fremantle possibly do the same in the next few years, depending on the government plans there. So there's probably an area of comparison to make sure what they're doing is about right. And often what you'll find in your modelling is that you're always building for someone else's rough guess. Has anyone ever heard the term high level or back of an envelope calculation? Yep, most people are not there. A lot of the time what you're doing, and it could be 100 worksheets long, it could be thousands and thousands of hours of building. You're actually trying to get back to the same number that someone thought of very early on. The appropriateness of the model really just makes sure that what we're doing is actually showing someone a journey from what they know as assumptions to what they think the output is. But we're doing that, and it just says here, directly and faithfully. We're doing it in a way that's not cluttering or unnecessary. Really what I think the most appropriate model is one that can answer the question with the least amount of the best time. And it can really give users of that model a good way to buy into it and feel that they're comfortable with what they're doing. So that's the F and the A. The S is structured. So a lot of people, I agree, said simplicity was a good one. But it's kind of synonymous with how they're going about FAST here. So what they're talking about here is consistency in the way you lay it out and organise the model. Making sure that the integrity is maintained throughout its lifetime. And the note there that is particularly as the model's author may change. We all know this happens. Someone starts it, someone else picks it up, someone else picks it up after that. You can see how it's changed. So to the extent the structure's been maintained and reflected over that time, it should help manage risk a lot more there. Transparency is a really interesting one. We always find in the work there'll probably be 3 key variables or 3 key things that will always be at play and trying to be managed in a model. The first is the robustness of the model. The second is the flexibility of it. So how much can you, what sort of sensitivities and scenarios can you put through it? And the third is transparency. And we always say if you have to make a decision over one of those 3, because at any one point in time they may compete with each other, always pick transparency. Always try and make sure your models are just simple, clear, that can be easily understood by each other, by others as well. So we'll come to that in a bit more detail as well. So yeah, I pulled down the FAST standard earlier in the year, and I know that hasn't changed since then. And if you want to dig a bit more around that, you do. So the FAST standard has 4 key sections, and I'll just cover some of those off very briefly as well. Workbook design, it's actually starting with the workbook being filed. Worksheet design takes you down to a more narrow focus. So you're in the detail of one sheet that may be calculating a particular thing. The line item. So for that term there, just an easy way to relate to that is the fact that that's what we're calculating. They also go through the Excel features in Excel that you could be using as well. So it's quite prescriptive in what it does. It's not you must do this, you must do this, but it gives some sections to guidance there. So the worksheet design. Separate the worksheets by type. And where they've got their terminology, foundation, worksheets, presentation, and so forth. I've really thought of it as inputs, calculations, and outputs. They also introduce a 4th element called controls. So any checks in the model, any sensitivities, scenarios, or change logs as well. So really, we're trying to get a sense of the model may have some various components to it, and we're all trying to separate those in its own worksheet or section of a worksheet itself. An interesting point there is around consistency, column structure, and time frames used in the model. The way Excel thinks and the way it's designed to think is most of the time we actually see some formulas that may be various columns, rows, across the page, down the page. To the extent we can make sure that if we've got a time frame in our model, so if anyone hasn't heard that before, a series of forecast dates, each one of those is in its own column. Excel can actually think differently than if they are in different columns across different worksheets. It's referred to as matrix integrity, and I'll give you some examples of how we can do that as well. Distinguish cells that import or export data from other sources. So actually try and pull that out and actually separate that in the workbook itself. Has anyone ever seen a formula that is massive because it's got a file name to it? Usually it's like users, documents, and so forth. Someone's probably linked a cell in there, and if they've done it in a calculation, we've almost lost a bit of visibility as to where it's coming from and how it's entering into our model. And we might be able to track that through that way. The next point it does there is calculation should only be done once, likewise for inputs. And you'll see that when I come across some of the best practice principles we use at work. Use positive sign conventions to reflect inflows and outflows. Would anyone have an idea where that may be relevant in sort of pulling information into a model? Does anyone ever work here where they pull in information from the trial balance? Sometimes with accounting programs they actually have what's called a natural sign. They have debits and credits and actually revenues negative and so forth. So what we're trying to do is actually see, well, what's the source of information? And what does it make sense to do when it's in a model and it's an output? Would you expect revenue to be negative in a financial forecast? No. So the fact that it is in the trial balance system, we probably have to do a conversion there to make sure when we read it, we're actually thinking this is what I'd expect. The flip side to that revenue example with expenses, you expect to see expenses to be negative. Yeah, it's one that may divide the room because we often expect that, yeah, that's a deduction for what's going on. Some people like to see the positive and then the total subtracted from another number. So there, once again, we've introduced an element of user sort of preference or considering what's going on there. And we've also got there about minimising the interlinking between worksheets. So trying to set information up, call it up in another worksheet, calculate it there, moving forward. Rather than just adding a string into sheet 1 plus sheet 2 plus sheet 5, go back to sheet 3, then go to 10 and come back to 4. Trying to just make sure that we're minimising that and getting that information through to it. So the workbook design's thinking about it at probably that higher level, and you might be able to see through this slide here that with worksheet design, they're getting a lot more prescriptive as to what to say there. So it says each column should have a consistent purpose, i.e. it's a time series, so it's a series of dates, it's a total. And there's also the fact that guidance can be used on the horizontal orientation of each worksheet. So actually saying set it out across the worksheet rather than down. Bit of a quiz for the classroom and those online. Who knows how many rows you can go to in the new versions of Excel? Million? Yep, you can go to a million. I think it's 1,000,064 or something. Who's got an idea in alphabetic as to what the last column is? Anyone remember that? It used to be IV, but now it's not. It's FD. So you can actually go 16,000 columns across. So you get a sense that there's no limit to up and down the way you go. But what FAST is saying is probably the best way to comprehend it is to lay it out across if you've got your time series. So 16,000 columns, even if you did a daily model, you know at 365 days, you're probably not going to run out of those columns. So you can model all the way there as you go. Calculations should flow from top to bottom, left to right. So this is actually a combination of one, the way Excel's programmed. Secondly, and when I say programmed, I actually make the distinction between the way Excel actually thinks in the Western world is the way we read as well, top to bottom, left to right. And if we actually bring a counter flow back into that, it can actually affect the speed and the performance of Excel itself. So if we can think about how it's structured, the way we anticipate to read it, almost like a book, then that's a good way that we can help lay out the worksheet. Avoiding hidden information in the worksheet. So there's several ways you can do that. You can actually just change the row of the column height from width to 0. You can group things and so forth. But often when we found that happens, you're starting to take the transparency away from users as well. This next point here is really fundamental. Calculations to be included in a separate block to distinguish their purpose. Replicate calculations using cell anchoring as appropriate, and order the calculations to ensure they can refer to precedence logically. So some examples of that might be depreciation calculations. Some models have some for accounting and tax, because there's different ways you can claim that information for the financial forecast. It might be different accounts that you know sum up the information above. And you can lay those out to what's going on there. An example that I'll introduce in the section going forward is the corkscrew account. Has anyone ever heard that term before? No, so we'll actually cover that off when we do our three-way rules. But one of the greatest examples I saw of this was I was doing some work down at Warrnambool. We offered to stay back for a few days and take them through some Excel training. And we actually taught the finance and IT team how to build some forecast models. And I looked out the window and there was just like someone was preoccupied. A lady was like, well, it really looks like it's getting stormy out there. And I said, oh, mate, is everything okay? She said, oh, no, the cattle's in the bottom paddock. I need to get them up the top out of any chance of getting muddy and also in the shed. So I said, all right, well, do you want to use this corkscrew account to try and balance your balance sheet? And she said, no, I've never done modelling before. Is it okay if I go now? I said, oh, I'll spend 5 minutes on it. And I looked at her and she smiled and she said, I did it, I've got to go. And I saw her run out the door. She came back 2 hours later after sort of the office had shut. She came back and said, it's really great, I wish I'd stayed more, but I got to do it in that short time. So the corkscrew account is a process in which, I'm not sure if we've got a pen on this. is really a way which will come, I'll give you some slides as to working out how you roll forward forecast information. No. So the other way to think about it is a full line account or a base account. So in accounting, base stands for beginning value, just a marker. Sorry. Base is a beginning value. The A is what's been added to that account. The S is anything that's been subtracted, and the E is the ending. Across those four lines, we actually calculate the beginning and ending value. Then the corkscrews will take the ending value of the first month and bring it forward to the ending value of the next. And it cascades down that way as well. The other thing that they talk about there is using flags and period factors to go through and work out what you're doing. So sometimes in each month, you might have to do some conditions. So some might only be at a year end, some might be every 6 months. And this is a way to start to use some techniques to get your model to think about that. I'll show you some of those examples in the Excel we go through. The line item itself. So once again, I mentioned that we're going down to that level of granularity. So this is the basic, sort of the lowest level that we can build it up. It says each line should have its own purpose. It should be a series of inputs, a constant number or a series of inputs across a time frame. The rule of thumb, or I've put in brackets there, the rule of 24 seconds, dictates how long the formula should be. Who put their hand up and seen an absolute monster of the formula? Yep. The good and bad thing that Excel does these days is you can actually drag the formula bar out. It can be really big. We actually don't want that to happen. So an example of that is Excel. Just open it up here. Forgive me online, we'll just see as it open up. So the formula bar that I was referring to is, we'll just create this new sheet. This bar here, does everyone see how where it's opened up, it's actually lower than it can be? Have a look at that. In Excel, you can actually have the formula bar as big as the screen. You can't see any of your model if you've got it open. Believe you me, we actually see models that have formulas that are that big. So what this rule of 24 is saying, the 24-second rule, is that a formula should be no longer than your thumb to read, so there's no need to pull the thing down. And if you can't explain that formula to someone else in 24 seconds, it's too big. So just to do that as a bit of a guide can help you going on there. And for those that said yes for simplicity, you can see how this is reinforcing some of those things as well. So FAST also goes into the fact that some Excel guidance is given. It talks about ensuring simplicity, like flags, the use of one formula called index, rather than using an F, and making sure that there are no nested functions as well. Has anyone ever seen a formula that says if this, do this, then if this, do this, if that? Yep. Do you know how many times you can do that? It's infinite now. Apparently in Excel 2003 it used to be 13, but now they've made it infinite. You never want to see more than one. So the way that FAST is reading it, and I'll let you have a look at that in your own time, is giving you some alternative techniques to do that. So the next part that I put in capital there is talking about embedded constants. Who's got an idea what another term for that might be? Never heard the term a hard-coded number or a hardwired to a formula? So sometimes they can be things like equals divided by 12. What do you think that's trying to do? Convert an annual number to monthly. Sometimes we see that in a formula. Sometimes we see things divided by 1,000. In those cases, if it was always going to be a monthly model, would the 12 be an issue? Possibly not. But if it was a quarterly model, we'd have to go and people that go from there. So what they're trying to say here is that there are some limited exceptions. But what we're really trying to do is make sure that nothing's in there that we can't pull out and put in its own section, and make sure that we can simulate and do the forecasting that way. The other thing that it talks about the way we structure our formula is that the fact that if we reduce spaces or parentheses, so has anyone ever seen where it says Excel wishes to correct your formula? You can see a whole heap of brackets added on here. It's just the way it needs to think to calculate it. Sometimes you actually think, well, yeah, the parentheses is the bracket that I need to do. Do I need to go through and do that? Over anchoring. Who's got an idea as to what key on the keyboard you need to hit to anchor a formula? Has everyone ever used that before? And what does it put into your formula? A dollar sign? There's various $2 signs usually. Yep. There's ways in which that anchoring can be done as well. And we've also said using -1 to switch convention as well. So if it's a negative that needs to convert, we do it with that. All line items must have a unique label and unit designation. So it's really trying to say very specific when I'm calculating it. Make sure the model has that documentation as to what's going on there. Check anchoring in repeated blocks to ensure it links to the new source. So if you've copied something down, you may have to reconnect it as well. And Excel function considerations. So I thought it was really interesting that it actually talks about what formulas to use. Now, we don't need you to actually be able to master one or the other. It's more to give you that concept that sometimes these best practices actually say, go and use different formulas as well. So there's an index formula, another one formula called choose. So it's just one thing that it's starting, I'm hoping you're starting to introduce to say that the way in which you approach it, one of our 3 considerations for our best practice is what we think about before we start and when we do our model. Formula choice can be one of those. MPV or XMPV. Sometimes these are problematic, and I'll give you some examples of those. Fast goes through to say don't put those in the model. Has anyone ever used those formulas before? Well, I'll show you some examples there. But often they're the key number of a model. You need to know what it's worth today. You can do some adjustments for its present value by using formula that Excel has in it as well. But this is a case of saying be wary before you use that as well. Do not use offset or indirect. Has anyone ever heard of those functions before? A few nods there. They can be really problematic as well. And they also go on to say if you're using a formula like a round, make sure it's appropriate. So I've just pulled some examples there. 2 decimals for currency. What if we had 3 and it was $1 to $1? You can't go beyond 1 cent, can you? So there's no point. 4 is for indices, something like a CPI index. You can have that quote. That is 1 point. There's usually 4 numbers after it. There's no point having a 5th there. So you just cut it off where we need to as well. So just use well-defined formats, styles, and avoid emergent cells. So the other thing I thought was interesting is that there's some specific guidance here, and there's other research that's out there in the market that actually talk about what to do or not do. There's some Oak software that I'll introduce lately that actually weights their risk score based on nesting. So you can go in and see if the nesting's been to 3 levels plus, 5 levels, or plus 7. Believe you, that we come back with models when we run that Oak software and it's just plus 7. It can tell you also the number of offsets, indirects, lookups, or if error as well for the use of the model. So this is my sort of way of thinking about these things in the public domain that you can use to impact our modelling as well. One thing that you may also see is that a lot of what's common is common across many different sources. So this is one thing we've got at PwC called our Axis of Spreadsheet People. So the man that created that name is still with the firm. He never changed, so he works at the firm, which is great because he's very, very passionate about it. But this ranking of information that came out of it is ones that you can start to see are sort of common in the fast practice and a few things like that. We know them to be problematic. We know them that when they are in a model, they can really start to cause some damage. We did recently put a questionnaire up on the internet for people to rank them. Would anyone like to guess of that? This is what I thought was number 1. It was close. It was up there. I certainly think it was in the top half. Anything else? Sorry? They were certainly up there as well. No, that was the circular reference. Has anyone ever seen that? Has anyone ever opened up a spreadsheet? This pop-up message just comes up. It's a circular reference present. They're an absolute nightmare. And we've actually found that we can't sign off on a model if someone wants us to review it if there's a circular reference in there. So happy to share with you all the link to that sort of voting there as well. Absolutely, yep. So for those that don't know, an array formula can probably allow you to match several conditions. So before, has anyone ever used the SUMIF function? Yep. Has anyone ever seen in the latest version of Excel they do SUMIF-S? You can can start to add different criteria. An array formula lets you structure it the same way. So we might be able to match dates with a date that we're in, with a general ledger name or account number, with a sum range, and you can start to put the strings together. Why we find that's a problem is that it requires an advanced understanding. The fact that you can get them wrong. Has anyone ever seen a formula with a curly bracket around it? Yep. Because we've actually had to go and apply that to do the array formula. Sometimes if that's not applied, you get a hash value or something come through your model. Or sometimes if it's not applied, it'll look for the first and always return the first. So it's just sort of saying proceed with caution in that regard. Yeah, but I like it, and what you're starting to get a sense of is with Excel now, what we can do with the array of formula we can do is really, really powerful. But in this case, and this is where I think you're in a position to test and challenge some of this, because you know some other purpose-built software that can help do something similar. Is this a way we can double check it quickly? Absolutely. This is a way that we can do it. You've seen some of the examples that we've walked through. A lot of what we've had to solve for a client was done in Excel because they've actually asked for it. Yeah, we've gone and said, well, we're doing a question, do you want to start in R or something like that? Do you want to use SAS? And they're like, oh no, it'll take us 3 months for our IT department to give it to me in Excel. And that's sort of where some of these things have sort of come about. What we've got the ability to do with Excel now is really, really great, but sometimes it comes with it. That's my thought. What we'll probably do is just probably have a look at another one that's been out there for a while, and I don't propose that we go through every one in detail, but you can start to see how they're similar here. So another one is the modelling best practice standards. So they were created by a company or a sort of a board that formed out of a company back early in the early 2000s. So they've been around for a long time. Different to FAST, they have both standards and conventions, and they build these up in a set of guidelines that relate to the development of a model. So there's a couple of concepts here and guidance here. So the first one really is the general concepts. Consider the purpose of the model. So we spoke about it earlier. What is it that we need to try and do, and how we set it down? Let's consider the purpose of each workbook, worksheet, and the individual component. So remember where FAST had workbook design, worksheet design, line item. You can see that coming close here. Classify worksheets, assumptions, and cells by content purpose. Just another way of saying what we did before. The workbook structure, it's gone a bit more specific here. Let's include a cover sheet, section dividers, table of contents, and navigation. So it's starting to sort of add a bit more meat to the bones as to what you're doing there. The sheet structure include titles, make sure that it's consistent in what we're doing, and grouping the rows and columns if we need to as well. That's one of Excel's good features. Format and styles, let's put in a key or a legend. Align the data consistently, i.e. make sure it's across the same columns or rows. Make sure the denomination's identified for each workbook or row. Just got an example of what the denomination might be. Ever seen a model that says at the top all amounts are in thousands of dollars? So you can see here that we've made a conversion somewhere, we assume from there. Denomination doesn't have to be financial. So one example, apparently, of one of the biggest spreadsheet errors in the world, there's a couple we can talk to throughout this, is someone was designing a bridge and they got rails and something else confused. One was the load bearing capability. Something else, they didn't do the conversion. And the plan actually got through and got audited. The model was audited without knowing that conversion. And the whole thing was literally falls over. So conversion is not just financial as well. And we're just talking about making sure that within that, if any sections are work in progress, let's colour them, let's label them out, and do something like that to draw users' attention to it. And assumption entry interface. Who's got an idea what that might mean? One word that starts with I. Inputs. So where are they in the model? Let's put all the assumptions in a dedicated sheet. It's identifiable. Let's not put them in the output sheets. Do not repeat assumptions. So I'll give you some examples of what's happened there later on. Make sure the control cells, so it's just a way of putting some of the checks in place, are in the top left of the range, just so that you're always looking at them before you move down the page. Look up data to be used in separate worksheets, and use the data validation function for in cell drop downs. Has anyone ever used that before? I'll show you how to do some of that with the models that we're doing as well, but it's one of Excel's inbuilt tools. Talking here about that point 6 there, incorporating a dedicated section alongside the assumptions to actually make sure we can put sensitivities through. They should sit alongside that base case. Remember I spoke about with the next big thing, it's going to be 422 million. Let's put some sensitivities through. We'll go through that as well. Outputs and presentations. Separate and ensure that no calculations are being performed in those. They should really just be the fact that they're just pulling information out from other parts of the model. Calculation formulas. The three key principles we really want to think here are when one or more adjacent cells contains the same type of calculation, it should be copied across the relevant range without being changed. You should be able to write one formula at the start of the row and copy it the whole way across. And a lot of what we do in reviewing formulas is done for that as well. And I'll show you some techniques around maths that help pull that out as well. Assumptions should never be embedded in calculations. Remember we saw that in FAST. And the model should never contain a circular reference. They're pretty strong about that. That's a view that they're forming in PwC as well. Name principles, making sure that the workbook contains the same version number as the underlying input sheets or wherever it's going as well. And making sure the name sheets incorporate standard prefixes. One golden rule in 1 week that I've learned in my time, never call a model final. It means you always have to change something. And believe you me, I've seen models hit our inbox and say model V final, V draft 1, V final draft. And it's because every time someone's had to change it. So if you are doing it, what this is saying is if you are up to version 47 and you've got an input sheet workbook as well, that's version 46, try and make sure they align, call them the same thing. If you're releasing a file, make sure they're consistent. Someone should know that the same file should be linked to the same output. So that's what they're really advocating there. Time series analysis. So for each period, include a start and end date. Period numbers, which are called counters. Ensure each worksheet contains the same number of periods. So it's just a check to do. If we're doing a 10-year financial forecast, make sure that one doesn't contain 11 or another 8. Just know there's something up there. Checks. So the next part there is around building into our model error checks, sensitivity checks, and alerts. Include indicators or flags to make sure we go through there. And one of the PwC techniques, which I think it will briefly touch on so we can move forward tonight, is around aggregating all the checks up into a master check. Printing and viewing. So include a table of contents in the sheet page numbers. Making sure it's consistent, page margins, print views, page view, worksheet. One way this was reinforced to me was on a Friday night about 10 o'clock. I had a client ring up and said, I've just hit your model to print and it's gone to my little laser printer at home and it's just printing page 1 of 1,000. We've got a ream of A4 paper in there and he said, do I cancel it now or what do I do? And I didn't realise that guy actually printed off the model, ticked through it. So I had to say to him, yeah, stop printing, sorry, we've wasted your paper. I'll go into the office before we catch up tomorrow morning on Saturday and I'll print some A3 copies off for you to do it. For him, it was fundamental that he could print it off and tick it off. He wouldn't think it at this day and age, but he was the CFO of a business that was making quite a big decision on it, refinancing some debt that wanted to print it off and do it. And I hadn't asked him whether that was a key requirement in his model, and I didn't do it, and hence I got a phone call on Friday night. So it's one thing to always anticipate people's needs, and it could be anything, whether you're doing an Excel model or something else. Play it back to them. I think what's important for you is you want to see the dashboard, the P&L, and how often you print it. Do you want it over A4, A3, A4, that type of thing. It's really important because for this guy, one, he was angry that he nearly wasted all his ink, $7, pretty much, and $5 worth of paper, but it's just not what he wanted at that time. And we had to do a bit to sort of make it up to him the next day, go up to the office, go back out to his work. We had to meet him after he had his kids doing swimming lessons, and really all that could have been sort of managed by him. So they're funny, but they're small lessons that make a difference. And multiple workbooks. So if you are linking them into the model, make sure you have a dedicated input sheet. So there's a couple of others here that they're developing, which they haven't produced. But the last one there, miscellaneous, which is really quite great considering it does dictate a lot. Set calculations to automatic and also enable iterations. Has anyone ever seen that before? Why don't I spend just 2 or 3 minutes in that little Excel file that we did? and I'll show you what that means there. So I've just got a bit of data. Page lock on. So here we are here. We've got our sum function, and I'll actually bring it down to row. Remember that thing that I said, Excel will actually prompt you to say I've got a circular reference. It'll say careful that in your workbook you may cause and calculate incorrectly. So I've put an accidental circularity there. It's calculating itself to 0. Can everyone see how circular reference appears down the bottom? If I went into my file, if I went into my formulas, calculation options, and set it to manual, I can still see that my circular reference is still there. So for everyone following online, if you can, I'm in the formulas menu and I set it to automatic. Every time I hit F9, nothing's happening. If I go into my options, go into my formulas, click enable iterative calculations. Everyone see down the bottom left-hand corner that the circular reference was hidden? And it actually says that my sum number up in B6 is 16,000. Does that make sense? We know if I highlight it, it should be 16. So Excel is actually trying to think its way through. It stops, it iterates past. We've actually said calculate past the iteration and then come back to it. So sometimes we find, and a lot of this happens in models with circular references, Excel thinks it's got to a point, it stops. When I hit F9 again, what changed? 32. Six 3. It's loving it. I took off 1 and it's gone up that many. So this is just the way in which Excel is trying to think as well. So as a user of the model, even if I go back to my manual now, hit F9, it's not updating. If I replace this 1, we can all guess what 4 lots of 1 should be. Excel tells us it's 9,700. So what we have seen here, and I had to do that by doing it manual calc. If I hit automatic, hey, it's even having more fun. And sorry for those online, I'll make it a tiny bit bigger, but you can see here the way that we've structured this workbook is impacting the outputs. So if I go back into my options and I go back into my formulas and I click enable iterative calculation, it gives me my circular reference error. You can actually change for anyone that wanted to be interested in it. You can make the number of maximum or minimum changes to be more or less equal. We actually know with it calculated what should be 4. So that's just a way in which Excel is trying to tell us the way we structure it can impact our outputs. So if I just went into here, I think you'll all feel rest assured that 4 lots of 1 is equal to 4. But what the standards is sort of showing us is the way we've laid out that worksheet and how we've gone about it can really impact the outputs there. I won't labour on that too much, but I hope you just got that sort of little sense in that demo there as to what it can be doing. So where we've got the calculations and the circularity in that model, we're really trying to avoid that until I'm repeated and adhere to these best practices. The other one that we've got here is Smart, and I'll just go on this because I think it's actually been taken offline at the moment. It's Corelity who did this, have been acquired by another company. So they've got a couple of rules which are pretty useful. The dot guidelines type rules, so they're sort of having a go at the others. They say balance compliance with flexibility to uncover insights and analysis. I think that's really what we're looking to achieve here. Think about the end user. So what we're really trying to say here, there's a wide-ranging audience there. Sometimes they've got conflicting needs. What someone might want from a model is different to what you need operationally versus someone else strategically. So try and plan that out as you go. Focus on consistency. So models often contain various methodologies. Remember that in FAST, I think it spoke about different users and things like that. So one thing that can happen is, you can pull in a sheet from somewhere else, paste another one. Every model has it, they all tell a different story. It really starts to really impact the way that the flow and structure is being hit. keep it simple. So people guess the S for fast should have been simplicity. And that's right, it's PwC's #1 guideline there as well. Increased risk of errors with long formulas, and then we spoke about with fast the rule of thumb, the rule of 24 seconds. So the more that the brain has to think through, the more difficult it is. What do you think that has an impact on people trying to make decisions on the model? They don't touch on T. Trust. It's absolutely right. Trust. And one thing we spoke about just recently at work is there's always sometimes in a model a confidence event. So you find an error. And all of a sudden you're tracking along. When's the model going to be ready? 2 weeks. Oh, good. Can I have it yesterday? That's always a conversation we have in our job. Something happens, an error's found. The way we're tracking goes straight back to zero, if not behind. So people think, well, we can't trust what's going on. It takes a long way to get the model back to even where we were before, even though that was wrong in that regard. So we're really trying to make sure it's simple and trustworthy as well. Use an intuitive structure, and once again, it reinforces just the way Excel's programmed and the way we read the books in the Western world, top to bottom, left to right. Communicate a story. Bring in presentations and charts, and I'll show you that and what we do around bringing in dashboard. Incorporate powerful analysis. Be able to run sensitivities and so forth throughout the model as well. Build for the future. So that was the one around fast with the F for flexible. So within the reason, make sure it can be adapted for foreseeable needs. The last two, keep the model neat. So that's talking about the way it's built up, templates and styles. Make it easier to find errors where you can. Drawing users' attention to everything that might be alerted to the fact that something could be wrong. So I'll go through these very, very quickly. We might do a bit of a class exercise, and those online can contribute as well before we take a break. So we have 15 at PwC, 15 best practice top tips. First one, keep it simple and transparent. So you can see we're adding nothing new to what you've already seen that's out in the public domain. I've just put some other notes there as well. Separate our inputs, calculations and outputs, different sheets and different colours. We'll go through that a bit later as well. Apply colour labelling, formatting and units in a clear and consistent manner. Sounds similar. Keep the flow natural, exactly what everyone else has said. Input data only once and link to it many times. Eliminates the risk here of not updating all occurrences in the model. One example that we saw was someone had 30% as their tax rate. Makes sense because that's what we pay in Australia, corporate tax. But they had it in their P&L line, equals this multiplied by negative 0.3. They had it in their balance sheet to calculate their deferred tax losses, and in their cash flow to work out what they had to pay. A few years ago, when they were bringing through the paid maternity leave, some businesses went down to 28.5 cents by having the 1.5 cents as a levy that they pay into the maternity leave funds. To update that model over 10 years, they had to update the P&L, updated in the balance sheet and the cash flow. That was 30 lots of 30 that they had to go through and update and change, where it could have just been one input or a time series of inputs. And that's what we're trying to do here. Use one formula per row or column and write them capable of copy. So you've seen that, I think, in some of the others. Make column headings consistent throughout the model and use the same starting column for each series. Use repeating worksheet structures with identical structures or repeating calculation blocks. Make use of error traps and cross checks. And the thing that I mentioned there is there's no limitations that number you can have, but let's start to summarise them up and have one sheet so someone can actually go in and see where it is. Use range names wherever possible for cell references not visible. This probably one is that we haven't covered off before. It's actually saying if you can't see the calculation in the sheet, call it up from another sheet. Sometimes put a name on it. The way that we might apply a range name is that down. Put 1 to 4, so I hope those online can see it. And the shortcut for a name is Control F3. And I can put, Control Shift F3. Put it, the name ranges on what's in the right column. So can everyone see here now, up in my box here, it's called an input 1, 2, put 3. I can actually create a new sheet and I can say, there's a lot I have to find there. So if I just hit tab now, short, sorry. Usually you can hit tab and it'll pre-select the my number 4, but it's actually given me a formula in here that actually says what I'm referring to there. Sometimes the names can have a bit more intuition than the actual numbers themselves. Now I've really simplified that to that extent there, but that's just a technique that can help you as well. If we call input 1, let's call this the section, just given me up my names to select from. Let's select from the right column. So I've now got a cell called revenue variable fixed. If I want to go into my other sheet, call this profit, revenue. So I can hit my revenue. Oh, should have been plus because I made them negatives. Sorry. Let's just make that fun. So back in my sheet 3, my formula for profit, when I read it up the top, says revenue equals variable expenditure equals revenue less variable less fixed. So I've just used the range name to call that up. Now, if you're in that sheet and you're trying to do it, it must be hard to see. So sorry about that. Everyone can see this up in the formula bar there. It may be a way that you can trace it through. So if I went into my name manager, it gives me the fact that my revenue is in input sheet A2, my variable is in sheet A3, and my fixed is in A4. But I should just be able to write my formula that way to help users there. So anyone had an idea as to how that may help as well? So this is saying that they weren't inputs on the sheet. Who's got an idea where sometimes name ranges can help as well? Is there ever a program in VBA and things? That's a way that can help as well. Use cell protection. So lock the cells down for editing if you need to as well. We just put here, one of the things is that even with cell protection and passwords, people can still get in and do malicious damage. Someone told me once it would take 8 seconds to crack a password in a workbook. 6 of those are typing in password cracker into Google. Now, I think they had a bit of, like having a bit of a laugh there, but it goes to show in this day and age we can access it pretty quick. If we wanted to get in, we can. But we're just thinking about ways in which we can do this as well. So if anyone wanted to crack it, they always would. But let's just try and do it for the common user there. Include explanations, documentation, and user instructions. So making sure that we can lay out what should be happening so that users can pick it up and read that to understand what's going on there. The last point there is around the structure diagram or dynamic descriptions of where the assumptions and calculations are. The third one, identify, label, and separate real and nominal costs. Does anyone know the distinction between a real and a nominal cost? Adjusted for inflation. Okay. So a real input has no inflation in it, and a nominal amount will have some sort of cost escalation, revenue growth, baked into price. One way I was told to remember it was nominal has more letters, so that's the biggest one. That's the one with inflation in it, but real is there. So it avoids double inflation errors or apples and pears type comparisons. They can be quite problematic there. The final two in our 15 best practices are treat each external link as an individual input cell and add navigation tools such as hyperlinks and so forth so you can move around the model. It won't change the integrity of the formula at all, but it enhances what someone's doing and how they feel with something as well. So there are our best practices, and I thought I may just sort of skip over those a bit so that we could get sort of a bit of a group activity, just so that you feel you're doing this as well. So we've done this in some other classes, just getting together. You can do it on your own, or you can work with those next year. We might allow 5 minutes just to think about knowing a bit more about best practice. How do we go about structuring prior to commencement when we do our model? when we review and decide for a model. So those that have joined us on the Skype, if you want to take number 3, how do best practices help us when we review and decide a model? If people on the left here, maybe first sort of bit on this way, I want to talk about number 2, how you build a model. People at that end of the class want to talk about how you would think about prior to commencement what you should do. We might just have a bit of time to reflect on that and catch up that way.
One of the online students asks you to...
Oh, sure. So I think we'll just spend 5 minutes to sort of reflect on what we're doing. And what I've put up here for this class activity, for those who can see it on page 34 of the slides, is I've grouped some of the best practices into the 3 areas we talk about. What we think about prior to commencement, what we think about during the model build phase, and when it's time to review and decide from our model. So for the online students, if they want to put some contributions up around review and decide, this side of the room think about model build, and that side of the room think about prior to commencement. So 15 minutes is a lot. We'll probably just do it in 5 to make sure we can get a break before we go into some other content. Please feel free to talk. If you want to do it on your own, that's cool. We will have a time where we'll catch up, and I'd love to hear your thoughts and give you a chance to contribute that to the group. People just sort of thought it through themselves. Did anyone want to sort of think back as to what the last hour together sort of meant, and whether there's anything different you would do if you were approaching the model? If anyone online would like to post their ideas, read those through to the class. What do you think about a bit more understanding of best practices? What's it really trying to tell you?
One of the students is asking ideas on what?
Ideas on how the best practices help us with our modelling. No. Well, I think one of the groups before had an assignment on how they would use the best practices to approach their modelling. So that's why we sort of built this into the module. But what I was really thinking around here is, and this is where some of the things I was thinking, prior to commencement, FAST talked about the appropriateness of the model. So who's it going to? Keeping it simple and transparent, the things that I've sort of said underpin a good model. Communicating stories, one. So what's it meant to tell us? Build for the future, the fact that it will be done in a certain period of time and move forward. Flexibility, so it's not just about now. The assumptions, spoke about that with where they should be located, how they should be pulled through in the model. Think about the end user and keep it neat. So they're things that even before we hit Excel itself, we should be really thinking about. The methodology we use out where it really is around scope and specification. Model build. So what general concepts that BPM put in place, the standards that we put through there. The workbook structure, the multiple workbooks come out of some of the information from FAST and the spreadsheet standards. Calculation logic, how we actually go about doing that, which formula we choose, making sure we're consistent in how we do our formulas and the styles we adapt. Remember that one we spoke about in the class activity about setting the calculations to automatic, making sure they're moving. So they're all things we think about when we're building. Sometimes inadvertently we may stray across from those. If we can really stop and pull back and review the model in that sense, that's great. So when it comes time to reviewing and making a decision for our model, is there a sensitivity analysis that we've got in place? Are there outputs and presentations we can easily print off? So the example of that guy that wanted on Saturday morning. Does the analysis culminate into a single dashboard? Have we got some time series analysis? So what's happening over the forecast? Have we protected the model? Have we built in error checks? Can we print it well? And are there any macros or VBA that we need to be aware of? Sorry for those in front there. Excuse me, sorry. Listen. Sorry? Yeah. Yeah. Oh, they're the reference back into the material. So it just cross-checks it, yeah. Cool. Feel free to put up your hand.
There's a question online.
Yeah, sure. So, following best practice principles for sensitivity analysis aids with review and better decision making, ? Is that what we're saying? So, yeah, thanks, Leo. What we're really trying to say, and I've tried to mention this at the start, is by adopting these best practice principles, we're making it more robust, but we're also allowing it to be flexible enough to actually go in and be able to make good decisions from it. So that's really why when I was speaking to the people coordinating the unit, we thought that for the first little bit, it's more introductory and a lot more theory that gets sort of covered off in this first hour or so around these best practice principles. But Leo made a good point there around it's really trying to enhance what we're doing. So what I think we will do is just take a tiny deeper dive into a worked example, and then we can sort of build on this as well. So we've heard the theory, let's look at what it looks like in practice. So I said there's no one right way to model. Two people can undertake the same task with different approaches, and they may end up with the same outcome, let's hope so, or they may arrive at a result that differs, but within appropriate tolerance. So that's useful as well. Which one's right? Well, the answer is it depends, and I'm not saying that to avoid having to answer it, but it depends on what the purpose of the model is and whether that purpose is being met. So in this next section here, we'll bring some of these best practice principles into a worked example and illustrate the ways in which our model can be structured to enhance or limit due to the workbook and the formula construct as well. So everyone remember the next big thing? Who remembers what the revenue number was? 1 billion. Can anyone see a billion in that model? Remember we spoke about the best practices? Yeah, all amounts are in $1,000. So $1 million is equivalent to $1 billion. Remember we spoke about a 30% gross margin? This is just the way that this forecast P&L looks. I've mentioned the gross margin of 446 million before. So if anyone does have the Excel case studies and want to refer to those, I think the first one, part 1, actually probably puts together the structure, and we work through the various modules as we go through to sort of add some of these bits as well. But here's our next big thing model. We've got $1 billion revenue and 30% EBITDA. So in the model itself, if anyone's got access to it, and I don't expect you to have to look at it now if you've got access to it here, we can actually see that the model has 4 worksheets. Self, it's from the desktop. So part 1 is a very, very simple workbook. For those online, if you've got access to it, great. If not, those in the classroom can see our $1 billion and our 30%. It's got 4 sheets, inputs, calcs, high level, and a template. So this is one where I just tried to set it up. A lot of the best practices spoke about setting it up, having the consistent periods across the columns, and things like that. So this is our template that we can use if we want to build a new sheet, copy that and do it forward. So some of the best practices talked about having a section label, a row description, some notes, some units, some row totals, some analysis. So in each one of these sheets, you'll see some inputs, and I've just tried to log here. Some of them said mark each section with a heading to assist users. Locate inputs in a dedicated cell. So what's our model start date, our periods per month, forecast years, and so forth. So this is just the way that this model's laid out. We've got a bit of a saying in our team at work that the inputs are coloured bright yellow. We call that cataract yellow, because if you stare at it long enough, you get yourself a cataract. But we've got some inputs here in yellow and some in blue. That's just the distinction. Some are meant to be static and some are meant to be user defined. So in this case, we've got the distinction between the 12 periods per months per period or the forecast. So if it's a quarterly model, we change it back to 4 and we can see what happens going forward. We've got our forecast sales volumes here. We've got our selling price, forecast growth. So this is just a very simple model. It's got calc detail, which has got our forecast here, and calc high level. What can people see about the same numbers coming out of both sheets. They are the same. $1 billion revenue, 30% EBITDA. That's what we've got. And I did that for a reason. And this comes back to the questionnaire. I think someone have a question on Skype?
Yes, someone is asking if they can get it online.
Ah, yes, we thought they were posted. We'll post.
It's not on cloud.
Not on cloud?
So maybe we can put it on cloud.
We will. We'll put it, if we can, on the break, or we'll try and get it to you later. But those following along online, we are just on page 37 in the slides. So the outputs from Calc Detail and Calc High Level are identical, but the approaches taken to do that have an impact on the analysis that we can perform. So what I'll do as I discuss this a bit more is introduce various tools and techniques that we can use to interrogate this file, determine if it's fit for purpose really. So some of the tools and techniques that we'll use are various things. Why I really wanted to put these in is to give you a sense of what can happen. Has anyone ever been at work and an email's come in with an Excel attachment to it? Absolutely, we receive them every day. Some people receive them every hour. But what we need to do is try and, I've put in brackets there, get up the curve. We want, as in short a period as possible, understand what the outputs are and what's going on. So in this section here, there's several tools or techniques that we can do to assist that. One is a spreadsheet summary report, and I'll show you how you can get some tools to do that. The second is a spreadsheet map. The third is a technique that Excel has, go through special, called the F5 key. And the second technique there is analytical view. So we might work through a couple of these before we sort of take a break in the class. But once we've got a good understanding of the model first, then the simulation modelling can really commence. So we've actually, it's come to us in our inbox. We need to spend a period of time getting comfortable with it. Then we can really start to stress test it, do what we need to do. So the tool one, the spreadsheet summary report. So there's several tools you can go and download, I think trial versions of if you wanted to, and have a look. They provide the listing of the structural elements of the model. Most are in the form of an Excel agent that you can use to put in, and they'll run an automated process in the background. Some of the things that we want are the number of worksheets in the model. Who can remember the number of worksheets in our model so far? 4. But if we've got our circular references turned on, it's 1600, wasn't it? It's being smart there. The number of rows or columns that are in each worksheet. The number of a unique formula, and it's a really important concept when we're reviewing models, because that is a formula that's a copy to an adjacent cell, either above or below. So remember some of the standards talked about creating a formula and copying it across and down. These tools allow you to identify those. What's the percentage of unique formula to total formula? Then I've put there that the lower is the better. Because if we've got consistency across our formula, we know that we don't have to check the box. What are the number of constants or input cells in our model? And what's the data flow between each? So I've just got some information here from the Oak spreadsheet, the Oak tool or Spreadsheet Advantage. Put the links up there for people if they want to grab them. So the Oak summary is in the top, where I've called that number 1, and the Spreadsheet Advantage is down the bottom. So what are they telling us? They're confirming what we already know. So there are 4 worksheets in the model. This one labels at 1 to 4. This one we've got to work out that there's 4 there. Most of the inputs in the inputs worksheet are inputs. So in this case here, in inputs, we've got 77 cells that are constant cells. We've got 20 formula. And what we can see here is that these inputs are referred to within the model. So inputs gets pulled through to the model and goes into the calcs, into the high-level calc, and into the template a few times as well. So I've just put down the bottom there based on what you can see on this slide. It's all good. Well, let's have a think. Who was paying attention? How many number of times did the calc detailed worksheet refer to the input sheet? Did I remember? Think of a number between 7 and 9. 8. How many times did the high-level sheet refer to the input sheet? Did anyone remember that? 5. Is that a good thing? How many formula were in the calc detail sheet? There were 19. And what were the number of unique formula in the high-level sheet? 20. So between the 2 sheets, we've got, and I'll go back and show you, We've got 20 unique formulae in the high level, and it pulls 5 times from the inputs. We've got 19, so less formulae in that model, but it refers to the detailed sheet 8 times. So really the way it's structured is impacting what we can do. Which sheet do you think is the best one? Detailed. Yep. There's several reasons why. So the calc detailed appears to have less unique formula, and it's also referring to the number of works, the input sheet more times. You think that's a good thing? Absolutely, I agree with you. And here's how we can go through and work it out. So the question was a bit rhetorical, but behind the numbers lie a clue to one of the best practice principles that we introduced, embedding hard-coded numbers into the formula. So in the example, if you've got it, for the online people, we'll get you one. In the calc high level, in column I11, J11, K11, and L11, so let's just go to that now. High level, I11, J11. Can everyone ever see now in that formula, there's hard-coded calculations? Can anyone give an idea as to what's going on here as well? I'll go back to the slides so you might be able to see it better. What's ridiculous about that number there? The number of decimal points. It's probably being done through a goal seek or something like that. You know, this was trying to say is in column I, it's the second forecast period. Take H, which is column before, multiply it by 2.5 times. It's not quite 2.5, it's 2.625. Then you take it in the third year, and you go back to year 2 and times it by 1.6. Here we're timesing it by 0.91, so we're actually taking something off it. But the fact that this is so huge is a good clue that someone's gone in there and tried to do that. So the rounding's a clue. The forecast really is, in our model, year 2 revenue is 128 million, which is 2.65 times the year 1 revenue, which is 50. And basically I wrote those numbers to get it to be $1 billion. But you can see how the detailed sheet, and what this is the second technique around a map. So this section here of the slide is one workbook, and this is in the other, and I've just tried to lay them up side by side. So I've run a map off the 2 models. Now the calc detail has one formula, and it's copied across. Can everyone see that? This one has one formula, and it's copied across. What we're also doing is we're seeing that this is row 11. Can everyone see how here that this one is its own formula? It's actually said that those embedded inputs have created a fact that it's a new formula every time. So the map, in this case, is a technique to do it. The other thing that it's showing down here is that these are all numbers. So in the calculation sheet, we said we had less links to the input sheet and we had more calculations. We've also got more inputs in this sheet. So we're getting the same outputs. Remember, each sheet had exactly the same numbers, but the way it's structured can really impede what we're doing. So the map may help us go through and identify that as well. So this is just 2 workbooks side by side. And what I've done here is just giving you that sense in the high level one. And for those online, we're on page 44 of the book. I actually said, remember I said this equals 2.565 times the one before? Well, I put one base unit in and used those goal seek numbers to get to $1 billion. I'd said that our gross margin percentage is 42.9%. So that let me work out my cost of goods sold. And you can see here how the inputs in the yellow line up with the numbers and so forth in the spreadsheet map. So it's a way of just going into the file and pulling it out that way. Any questions on that? Has anyone ever used a review map or anything like that before? No? Well, I don't expect you to, but you might never have to. But I at least want you to know that it's a technique that's available out there to help you. And in this case, it's given us a sense of what we can do here. So the other tool that we can have is Excel's inbuilt go-to function. So there's a couple of things we'll just tick off before we have a little break, and we'll probably just do this one on that sheet as well. So Microsoft Excel has some inbuilt functionality, if you like, to let us test, review, and interrogate our model. One is the go-to special menu, which shortcuts F5. So if I actually go into my model, and I'm in my high level page, and if I just highlight the block we're working with, and I hit F5, I can go to special. I can pull up and hit my constant values. Everyone ever see how there's different numbers shaded? I can go and colour those yellow if I like. And all I've done in doing that is try to pull out the numbers that have hard codes. If I do F5 again, and I went special, and I picked my formulas, see how it selected everything but those cells. So that might be a way in which it's coming to your inbox. Let's pick it up and let's just go into this. Let's just go in and hit F5, special, constants. Here, beauty. Hey, I don't want cataract yellow anymore, but I want them to be distinguishable. So let's make the blue, and let's make the bold, so that someone can pick them up, and that's my model that I can send to them. I might just have here. I'll just let users know that there. But I've used the F5 key to do that. The other thing that we can do on our inputs page, if I were just to do this, special, my constants, it's probably gone and picked up things that are my inputs. And rightly so, it's picked up other things that, other than the yellows that I've coloured, because some of those in the input sheet are text and so forth there. But if I did it again, see how everything's done, F5, special. If I hit my constants and I don't want my text or my logical or my errors, I just want numbers. Can everyone see how it's just zoned in on those yellows? So that's probably a technique that you can use if a model hits your inbox. You can use some of those techniques as well. And in this case, we highlighted the cells and we colour the blue. So that was just one way to do it as well. I think what we might suggest now is we just have a little break. Would people rather have 10, 15 minutes now or push through and take that time?